For the first 30 seconds of this video, imagine discovering that one of the most iconic and colorful characters in gaming history was born from strange decisions, hidden limitations, and surprisingly, dark ideas. Imagine realizing that Donkey Kong was never meant to be cute, heroic, or even lovable, but instead emerged from a mix of technical restrictions, storytelling, shortcuts, and unsettling themes that most players never noticed. Because today, we are uncovering the funniest, weirdest, and most intriguing secrets behind the dark origins of Donkey Kong. How he shaped Mario's destiny, how he accidentally created modern gaming villains, and why his first appearance says far more about early video game history than Nintendo ever openly admitted, and by the end of this video, you will never see classic arcade games the same way again. When people think about Donkey Kong today, they picture a goofy, tie-wearing gorilla, banana holds, jungle beats, and family-friendly adventures. But rewind all the way back to his original arcade debut, and the story becomes strangely darker. Because Donkey Kong was not introduced as a misunderstood hero or even a charming anti-hero, but as a violent obstacle, an aggressive force, and a creature defined almost entirely by rage, possession, and destruction, smashing barrels endlessly, as if trapped in a loop of frustration with no clear motivation other than chaos. One of the most curious details about Donkey Kong's origin is that he was never designed to be a gorilla in the way we understand the character today, because his strange proportions, stiff movements, and exaggerated expressions were the result of severe hardware limitations, which accidentally made him look more monstrous and unpredictable, giving him an unsettling presence that feels less like a cartoon animal and more like a living obstacle programmed to never stop attacking. As kids, we accepted that Donkey Kong kidnapped Pauline and climbed endlessly upward as Mario followed. But as adults, it becomes oddly funny and disturbing that the entire story boils down to a cycle of pursuit with no context, no explanation, and no emotional resolution, creating the impression that both characters are trapped in an endless conflict that neither of them fully understands. One climbing to escape, and the other climbing to fix something that keeps repeating. The barrels themselves are one of the strangest elements of all, because Donkey Kong's primary method of attack is throwing objects downward without aiming, without strategy, and without concern, which unintentionally paints him as a creature driven by impulse rather than intelligence, making his behavior feel less villainous and more like a raw expression of unchecked frustration coded directly into the game. Another dark secret hidden in Donkey Kong's origins is how closely he is tied to Mario's creation, because Mario, originally known as exists almost entirely as a response to Donkey Kong's aggression. Meaning that one of gaming's greatest heroes was literally born from reacting to chaos rather than seeking justice. Which is both hilarious and strangely symbolic of how early games focused on mechanics first and morality second. The environments in Donkey Kong also tell a quiet story that most players never notice, because the construction site setting is not a magical world or a fantasy kingdom, but a harsh industrial space filled with steel beams, ladders, and hazards, subtly reflecting. A darker, more grounded atmosphere where danger feels constant and survival depends on precise movement rather than heroism. Lives in Donkey Kong are another unsettling concept, because Jumpman falls repeatedly, gets crushed, burned, or hit, and instantly returns without consequence, reinforcing the idea that failure is expected, normalized, and even required. Which is funny in hindsight, but also reveals how early games treated characters less like people and more like replaceable pieces in a machine. Donkey Kong himself never evolves during the game, never reacts to progress, and never changes his behavior, which creates the eerie impression that he is not learning, not growing, and not thinking, but simply repeating the same actions forever, as if the game accidentally created one of the earliest examples of a character trapped in an endless behavioral loop. What makes this especially intriguing is that later games tried to soften Donkey Kong's image-adding personality, humor, and charm, almost as if Nintendo realized that his original role was too aggressive, too chaotic, and too unsettling for a long-term mascot, leading to a slow transformation from rage-driven obstacle into playful protagonist. Looking back, it is funny to realize that the name Donkey Kong itself reflects confusion and misunderstanding, because it was meant to suggest stubbornness rather than silliness, unintentionally giving birth to one of the most oddly named characters in gaming history, which somehow only adds to the strange charm of his dark beginnings. The music and sound design also contribute to this unsettling tone, because the repetitive arcade sounds sharp. Effects and relentless pace create tension rather than comfort, reinforcing the feeling that Donkey Kong's world is not meant to be explored, enjoyed, or questioned, but survived as efficiently as possible. What truly makes Donkey Kong's origins fascinating is that none of this darkness was planned in a traditional storytelling sense, yet it emerged naturally from limitations, design choices, and the simple goal of creating a challenging, arcade experience, proving that some of the most intriguing narratives in gaming history were accidental. As kids, we never questioned why Donkey Kong was angry, why Jumpman kept returning, or why the conflict never ended, because the goal was simple, and the mechanics were fun. But as adults, we can see how this simplicity hides layers of unintended meaning that make the game far more interesting than it first appears. In many ways, Donkey Kong represents the raw beginnings of video game storytelling, where emotion was implied rather than explained, and characters existed primarily to serve gameplay, creating worlds that feel oddly surreal when examined closely. The irony is that this dark, chaotic origin eventually led to one of the most beloved franchises in gaming history, showing how something born from frustration, limitations, and repetition can evolve into creativity, humor, and lasting cultural impact. If this video made you laugh, think, or see Donkey Kong and classic arcade games in a completely new way, make sure to subscribe to the channel, comment with the secret that surprised you the most, and share this video with anyone who grew up playing retro games. Because gaming history is full of dark origins hiding behind cheerful pixels.